Welcome to Cohere, Perspective from the Pines. This is a conversation series from Green Acre, a Bahá'í Center of Learning here in Elliott, Maine, where we explore the implications of the oneness for humanity. Cohere gets its name from the verb, which means to unite or to form a whole. And it's really part of Green Acre's overall mission to elevate the discourse around certain themes around justice, nobility, resilience, and the oneness of humanity. This is actually our second episode about the concept of constructive resilience.
And so this week we wanted to continue exploring that and expanding the theme and leaning into the aspects of constructive resilience that are more philosophical and practical and spiritual, and how to bring that together. And so to help us with this conversation today, we have Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hello, how are you, Claudia? Excellent.
Well, thank you for joining us. And Michael Penn is joining us from, he's a professor of Franklin and Marshall College in Pennsylvania, and he's also a Baha'i in the area. And he has a lot of interest in psychology and metaphysics and religion. And so we would be hearing those perspectives that you have to share with us on how to think about this theme of resilience and changing society into the practical and spiritual lens. And maybe we'll just like to open up the conversation with your understanding and definition of constructive resilience.
Right. That's a big question.
It is. Brave of you to join us.
The concept of constructive resilience reaches into many, many different areas of life. But I think that really at the heart of it, it's grounded in the notion that if life can be said to have a purpose, that purpose is development. Right. And that development requires efforts of various kinds. There are obstacles to development. There are challenges to development. And if we are to meet those challenges effectively, we have to learn how to do that. We have to learn how to respond to the challenges of life in such a way as to get out of life development. And so constructive resilience is really a discourse about how to harvest the challenges of life such that they reap benefit, so that they reap a fruit, a result. So we don't just suffer for nothing. You know, the most absurd condition is to suffer for no good reason and not to get any benefit out of it. So constructive resilience is in part about how to endure suffering in such a way that you will get something out of it, and then not just to endure suffering, but then to develop as a consequence of your experience, of your encounter, both as an individual and as a community with suffering. I would say that in the simplest, broadest terms, that is what constructive resilience concerns itself with. That's what it's about. And then, of course, it can be applied to many, many different areas of life.
Yeah, I kind of want to start taking notes. I think I'm going to look back to this episode later and, and take my own notes, because there's a lot to go off of there. But if it's okay, I would like to explore more how, like the practicality of those things, of how to put that, that resilience into action, into changing the lives of our community and our personal lives, and the life of society at large.
Yeah. Perhaps one question revolves around how we should respond to those who cause us to suffer. What should be our attitude? What should be our way with those who cause us to suffer? Because that's part of the dynamic of our lives, is that we have to encounter people, some of which are intentionally causing us to suffer, and some of which are causing us to suffer simply because they, like us, are in a process of development. And so whenever you encounter an imperfect creature, the result of those encounters can be that you make one another suffer. So constructive resilience is important, inviting us to reflect upon responses to suffering that is inflicted upon us by others that would help those who have caused us to suffer and also help ourselves. You probably know that the Bahá'í writings say something interesting about human beings. It says that when human beings do things that are nasty and mean and destructive, they do these things for three reasons: out of ignorance, out of illness, or out of immaturity. The Bahá'í writings pointed out that there's no separate force that you would call evil. And so our responses have to, in some way, seek to remedy illness, ignorance, or immaturity. And so when we can tailor our responses to aggression, to oppression, in ways that facilitate addressing those three problems, we get better outcomes. But if we imagine that people are essentially evil, then what we want to do is we want to destroy them. And we want to destroy because we want to destroy evil. But when we try to destroy others because we imagine that they are evil, we also destroy ourselves. And we destroy the environment in which development can take place. So constructive resilience invites a kind of a very mature response to various forms of cruelty and oppression and unkindness. And even to mount that kind of response is to create an environment that makes it possible for people to develop while they are addressing these hideous aspects of life, these difficult dimensions of life.
Yeah, but it's so difficult to I think switch your perspective to that, because like usually when you're hurt, you want to either stop the hurt or make sure the other person feels your hurt as well. So it's it's a very perspective changing way of looking at it, of thinking there's no evil, and also there's these things that we can do about it to overcome it. It's a lot to think about.
It's very, very challenging. In fact, the Baha'i writing suggests that it's essentially a spiritual challenge. And by spiritual challenge, I think part of what might be meant is that you cannot do it with mere human power. That actually the exercise of constructive resilience requires that first sort of you long for the good of others, for the good of society. And second, that you commit yourself to a set of values that you will not abandon no matter what. Because that's what suffering does, is suffering causes us to abandon our values. And when we abandon our values, then we become the very oppressive force that we are trying to overcome. So constructive resilience invites us not to yield so easily to the abandonment of our values. That in fact, when we are suffering, we have to hold on even more vigorously to our values. And part of that is reflected in the way that we talk, in the way that we speak. Human speech is one of the most powerful, it may well be the most powerful force in the universe. And so if you want to make a world that is animated by less cruelty, less violence, you have to pay a lot of attention to the way that you speak into the world, the way that you communicate with other human beings. And I think that part of this has to do with the interest that many of the world's wisdom traditions have had in the human heart. The idea that most of the progress that we make in the world, we make in the world essentially because either the human mind or the human heart has made an advancement, has progressed. And so constructive resilience thinks or believes or is committed to the idea that most social change is a matter of persuasion. It's a matter of persuading others by speaking to the human heart in such a way that people want to change. There's a really, really wonderful quotation in the Bahá'í writings that I could share with you. It says, "Human utterance is an essence which seeketh to exert its influence and needeth moderation. As to its influence, this is conditional upon refinement, which in turn is dependent upon hearts which are detached and pure." Isn't that amazing?
It's extraordinary.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite quotations. But this has been something that has been known for a long time. The Native Americans would take speech very, very seriously because they would say, the Lakota, for example, would say that when you speak, you are either advancing the world or you are presenting yourself as an obstacle to its good functioning. And so they encouraged us to contemplate how we should address other human beings when we are suffering in particular.
It's such an interesting challenge in my mind to think about, because so much of how we're presented with dealing with oppression or being hurt or various kinds of things is, we either sort of just accept it and pretend it's not happening, or we protest it, or we confront it. And to think about using, speech and using kind of a spiritual response to that, and sort of like you were describing earlier, a much more mature response, and seeing that and underlying that, at least in my mind, is this idea, if I take seriously the idea of the oneness of humanity, then me lashing out at somebody, even if they've hurt me, I'm missing the point, right? If I've been hurt, if I'm hurting someone else, I'm just causing more hurt to the oneness, to the oneness of us.
Yeah, when I got married to my wife, I had a very interesting experience. I married a woman who is a white American, and she has 2 children that were born in Bolivia, so my children are white. And when I got married, because I was really the first Black person that my wife's family had ongoing relationships with, we were encountering in one another sort of the legacy of racism. And in fact, her grandfather said that he did not want me to enter into their house. And that, so every Sunday morning they would go and they would have breakfast, and he would not allow me to enter. But my wife would always say, because she had this notion of constructive resilience deep in her, she would always say, exercise the most noble patience and observe the influence of this on the human heart. That's how she would think and talk. So literally for years, I would drop them by, I would greet him, and then I would go on my way, and then I would come back and pick them up. About 4 years into our marriage, I get a phone call. It is none other than Charles I, that's him. And he says, "Hi, Michael, this is Charles. I am so humiliated and so embarrassed by how I have treated you. I have observed you for these years, and you are such a good person. Please forgive me." That's what he says. "Please forgive me. And I want to send you a wedding present." And he sent me a table and 4 chairs. That was my wedding present.
Wow.
We were married. The years went on. I went to Switzerland. While I was in Switzerland, he's on his deathbed. And he says, "Where is Michael? Where is Michael?" And they said, "Michael is away. He's in Switzerland." And the sense that he gave was, "I really love Michael." And one could really see the extraordinary power of these forces that we tend to underestimate. I mean, we tend to think that they are weak forces, but they are very powerful, but they cannot be imposed. This is why the city of the human heart is very delicate. So we cannot insist on anything. We cannot even insist on a spiritual point of view. We have to invite people to consider the possibility that we could have a different way together.
Well, I want to keep this conversation going, but our time frame is short. So but I think that's a great, an amazing spot to end. And we are just so grateful to have a little bit of time with you and sharing your insights about this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and maybe just to close up that loop there, is there a perspective that you'd like to invite us into, as you shared, to utilize or practice constructive resilience during these times?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert on it.
Yeah. Okay.
But in terms of practice, I think that whenever we find ourselves perturbed by others, rather than have our immediate reaction be the custom, to pause for a moment, to create a space between our hurt, our insult, and our response, and then to consciously choose to answer the question, what response would be most helpful in a situation like this? And then act upon that value, act upon that response. And I think that as we exercise in our individual lives this capacity, it will grow in us. And we will find that we are less reactionary and more of the kinds of beings that the world needs if it's going to overcome the problems that it has.
There you go. That's beautiful. Now we can go. Thank you so much, Michael, for being with us today.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate it. And I know that you had a lot going on, and we're just so happy. I mean, I'm always just happy to talk to you. So
yes.
Love to see you guys. I love you guys.
Yeah, love you too. And hopefully our viewers can join us during this episode and continue to share their understanding of constructive resilience and how they're practicing that in their own lives. And we'll see them next time. Thank you, everyone. Stay well. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.